Big Knockover by Dashiell Hammett. I found Patty the Mex in G. LaRue's dive. Patty, an amiable con man who looked like the King of Spain, showed me his big white teeth in a smile, pushed a chair out for me with one foot, told the girl who shared his table, "Nellie, meet the biggest hearted dick in San Francisco. This little fat guy will do anything for anybody, if only he can send them over for life in the end." He turned to me, waving his cigar at the girl. "Nellie Wade, and you can't get anything on her. She don't have to work. Her old man's a bootlegger." She was a slim girl in blue, white skin, long green eyes, short chestnut hair. Her sullen face livened into beauty when she put a hand across the table to me, and we both laughed at Patty. "5 years?" she asked. "6, I corrected. "Damn," said Patty, grinning and hailing a waiter. "Someday I'm going to fool a sleuth." So far, he had fooled all of them, but never slept in a hoosgow. I looked at the girl again. 6 years before, this angel grace cardigan had buncoed half a dozen Philadelphia boys out of plenty. Dan Morley and I had nailed her, but none of her victims would go to bat against her, so she had to be turned loose. She was a kid of 19 then, but already a smooth grifter. In the middle of the floor, one of Leroy's girls began to sing, "Tell me what you want, and I'll tell you what you get." Patty the Mex tipped a gin bottle over the glasses of ginger ale the waiter had brought, and we drank, and I gave Patty a piece of paper with a name and address penciled on it. "Itchy Maker asked me to slip you that," I explained. "I saw him in the Folsom Big House yesterday. It's his mother, he says, and he wants you to look her up and see if she wants anything. What he means, I suppose, is that you're going to give her his cut from the last trick you and he turned." "Oh, you hurt my feelings," Patty said, pocketing the paper and bringing out the gin again. I downed the second gin ginger ale and gathered in my feet, preparing to rise and trot along home. At that moment, 4 of Leroy's clients came in from the street. Recognition of one of them kept me in my chair. He was tall and slender and all dolled up in what the well-dressed man should wear. Sharp-eyed, sharp-faced, with lips thin as knife edges under a small pointed mustache. Blue Point Vance. I wondered what he was doing 3,000 miles away from his New York hunting grounds. While I wondered, I put the back of my head to him, pretending interest in the singer, who was now giving the customers "I Want to Be a Bum." Beyond her, in the back corner, I spotted another familiar face that belonged in another city. Happy Jim Hacker, round and rosy Detroit gunman, twice sentenced to death and twice pardoned. When I faced front again, Blue Point Vance and his 3 companions had come to rest 2 tables away. His back was to us, and I sized up his playmates. Facing Vance sat a wide-shouldered young giant with red hair, blue eyes, and a ruddy face that was good-looking in a tough, savage way. On his left was a shifty-eyed dark girl in a floppy hat. She was talking to Vance. The red-haired giant's attention was all taken by the 4th member of the party on his right. She deserved it. She was neither tall nor short, thin nor plump. She wore a black Russian tunic affair, green trimmed and hung with silver dinguses. Black fur coat was spread over the chair behind her. She was probably 20. Her eyes were blue, her mouth red, her teeth white, the hair ends showing under her black, green, and silver turban were brown, and she had a nose. Without getting steamed up over the details, she was nice. I said so. Patty the Mex agreed with a "That's what." And Angel Grace suggested I go over and tell Red O'Leary I thought her nice. "Red O'Leary, the big bird?" I asked, sliding down in my seat so I could stretch a foot under the table between Patty and Angel Grace. "Who's his nice girlfriend?" "Nancy Reagan, and the other one's Sylvia Yount." "And the slicker with his back to us?" I probed. Patty's foot, hunting the girls under the table, bumped mine. "Don't kick me, Patty," I pleaded. "I'll be good. Anyway, I'm not going to stay here and be bruised. I'm going home." I swapped salongs with them and moved towards the street, keeping my back to Blue Point Vance. At the door, I had to step aside and let two men come in. Both knew me, but neither gave me a tumble. Sheeny Holmes, not the old-timer who staged the moose jaw looting back in the buggy-riding days, and Denny Burke, Baltimore's king of Frog Island. A good pair. Neither of them would think of taking a life unless assured of profit and political protection. Outside, I turned down towards Kearney Street, strolling along thinking that Leroy's joint had been full of crooks this one night, and there seemed to be more than a sprinkling of prominent visitors in our midst. Shadow in a doorway interrupted my brain work. The shadow said, "Psst." Stopping, I examined the shadow until I saw it was Bino, a hop-headed newsie who had given me a tip now and then in the past. Some good, some phony. "I'm sleepy," I growled as I joined Bino and his armload of newspapers in the doorway. "I've heard the story about the Mormon who stuttered, so if that's what's on your mind, say so and I'll keep going." "I don't know nothing about no Mormons," he protested, "but I know something else." "Well?" "It's all right for you to say well, but what I want to know is, what am I going to get out of it?" "Flop in the nice doorway and go shut-eye," I advised him, moving towards the street again. "You'll be all right when you wake up." Hey, listen, I got something for you, honest to God." "Well?" "Listen," came close, whispering. "There's a caper rigged for the Seamen's National. I don't know what the racket's, but it's real. Honest to God, I ain't stringing you. I can't give you no monikers. You know, I would if I'd known them. But honest to God, give me $10. It's worth that to you, ain't it? This is straight dope, honest to God." "Yeah, straight from the nose, Candy." No, honest to God." "What is the caper, then?" "I don't know. All I got was the Seamen's is going to be nicked. Honest to God." "Where'd you get it?" Bino shook his head, put a silver dollar in his hand. "Get another shot and think up the rest of it," I told him. "And if it's amusing enough, I'll give you the other $9. I walked on down to the corner, screwing on my forehead over Bino's tail. By itself, it sounded like it probably was, a yarn designed to get $1 out of a trusting gumshoe. But it wasn't altogether by itself. Leroy's, just one drum in the city that had a number and had been heavy with grifters who were threats against life and property. It was worth a look-see, especially since the insurance company covering the Seamen's National Bank was a Continental Detective Agency client. Around the corner, 20 feet or so along Kearney Street, I stopped. From the street I had just quit came two bangs, the reports of a heavy pistol. I went back the way that I'd come. As I rounded the corner, I saw men gathering in a group up the street. Young Armenian, dapper boy of 19 or 20 passed me, going the other way, sauntering along, hands in his pockets, softly whistling Broken Heart Sioux. I joined the group, now becoming a crowd, around Bino. Bino was dead, blood from 2 holes in his chest staining the crumpled newspapers under him. I went up to Leroy's and looked in. Red O'Leary, Blue Point Vance, Nancy Regan, Sylvia Yount, Patty the Mex, Angel Grace, Denny Burke, Sheeny Holmes, Happy Jim Hacker. Not one of them was there. Returning to Bino's vicinity, I loitered with my back to a wall while the police arrived, asked questions, learned nothing, found no witnesses, and departed, taking what was left of the newsie with them. I went home to bed. In the morning, I spent 1 hour in the agency file room, digging through the gallery and records. We didn't have anything on Red O'Leary, Denny Burke, Nancy Regan, Sylvia Yount, and only some guesses on Patty the Mex. Nor were there any open jobs definitely chalked against Angel Grace, Blue Point Vance, Sheeny Holmes, and Happy Jim Hacker. But their photos were there. At 10 o'clock, bank opening time, I set out for the Seamen's National carrying these photos and Bino's tip. Continental Detective Agency's San Francisco office is located in a Market Street office building. The Seamen's National Bank occupies the ground floor of a tall gray building in Montgomery Street, San Francisco's financial center. Ordinarily, since I don't like even 7 blocks of unnecessarily walking, I would have taken a streetcar. But there was some sort of traffic jam on Market Street, so I set out afoot, turning off along Grand Avenue. A few blocks of walking, I began to see that something was wrong with this part of town I was heading for. Noises, for one thing, roaring, rattling, explosive noises. At Sutter Street, a man passed me, holding his face with both hands and groaning as he tried to push a dislocated jaw back in place. His cheek was scraped red. I went down Sutter Street. Traffic was in a tangle that reached to Montgomery Street. Excited, bareheaded men were running around. The explosive noises were clearer. An automobile full of policemen went down past me, going as fast as traffic would let it. An ambulance came up the street, clanging its gong, taking the sidewalks where the traffic was worst. I crossed Kearny Street on the trot. Down the other side of the street, 2 patrolmen were running. One had his gun out. The explosive noises were a drumming chorus ahead. Rounding into Montgomery Street, I found few sightseers ahead of me. The middle of the street was filled with trucks, touring cars, taxis, deserted there. Up in the next block between Bush and Pine Streets, hell was on a holiday. The holiday spirit was gayest in the middle of the block, where the Siemens National Bank and the Golden Gate Trust Company faced each other across the street. For the next 6 hours, I was busier than a flea on a fat woman. Late that afternoon, I took a recess from bloodhounding and went to the office for a powwow with the old man. He was leaning back in his chair, staring out the window, tapping on his desk with the customary long yellow pencil. Tall, plump man in his 70s, this boss of mine, with white mustached, baby pink grandfatherly face, mild blue eyes behind rimless spectacles, and no more warmth in him than a hangman's rope. 50 years of crook hunting for the Continental had emptied him of everything except brains and a soft-spoken, gentle, smiling shell of politeness that was the same whether things went good or bad, and meant as little at one time as at the other. We who worked under him were proud of his cold-bloodedness. We used to boast that he could spit icicles in July, and we called him Pontius Pilate among ourselves because he smiled politely when he sent us out to be crucified on suicidal jobs. He turned from the window as I came in and nodded me to a chair and smoothed his mustache with a pencil. On his desk, the afternoon papers screamed the news of the Siemens National Bank and Golden Gate Trust Company's double looting in 5 colors. "What is the situation?" he asked, as one would ask about the weather. "Situation's a pip," I told him. "There were 150 crooks in the push if there was one. I saw 100 myself, or think I did. There were slews of them that I didn't see, planted where they could jump out and bite when fresh teeth were needed. They bit, too. They bushwhacked the police and made a merry wreck out of them, going and coming. They hit the 2 banks at 10 sharply, took over the whole block, chased away the reasonable people, dropped the others. The actual looting was duck soup to a mob of that size. 20 or 30 of them to each of the banks while the others held the street. Nothing to it but wrap up the spoils and take 'em home. There's a highly indignant business meeting down there now, wild-eyed stockholders up on their hind legs yelling for the chief of police's heart's blood. Police didn't do any miracles, that's a cinch. But no police department is equipped to handle a trick of that size, no matter how well they think they are. The whole thing lasted maybe 20 minutes. There were, say, 150 thugs in on it, loaded for bear, every play mapped to the inch. How you going to get enough coppers down there to size up the racket, plan your battle, and put it over in that little time? It's easy enough to say the police should look ahead, should have a dose for every emergency. But these same birds who were yelling rotten down there would now be the first to squawk robbery if their taxes were boosted a couple of cents to buy more policemen and equipment. But the police fell down, there's no question about that. There'll be a lot of beefy necks that feel that axe. The armored cars were no good. The grenading was about 50-50 since the bandits knew how to play that game too. But the real disgrace of the party was the police machine guns. Bankers and brokers are saying they were fixed. Whether they've deliberately tampered with or only carelessly taken care of is anybody's guess. But only one of the damn things would shoot, and it not very well. The getaway was north on Montgomery to Columbus. Along Columbus, the parade melted, a few cars at a time, into the side streets. Police ran into an ambush between Washington and Jackson. By the time they had shot their way through it, the bandit cars had scattered all over the city. A lot of them have been picked up since then. All of them were empty. All the returns aren't in yet, but right now the score stands something like this. The Hall will run God only knows how far into the millions. Easily the richest pickings ever got with civilian guns. 16 coppers were knocked off and 3 times that many wounded. 12 innocent spectators, bank clerks, and the like were killed, and about as many banged around. There are 2 bandits and 5 shot-ups who might be either thugs or spectators that got too close. Bandits lost 7 dead that we know of and 31 prisoners, most of them bleeding somewhere. One of the dead was Fat Boy Clark. Remember him? Shot his way out of Des Moines courtroom 3 or 4 years ago. Well, in his pocket we found a piece of paper, a map of Montgomery Street between Pine and Bush, and block of the looting. On the back of the map were typed instructions telling him exactly what to do and when to do it. Next on the map showed him where he was to park the car in which he was to ride with his 7 men, and there was a circle where he was to stand with them, keeping an eye on things in general and on the windows and the roofs of the buildings across the street in particular. Figures 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 on the map marked doorways, steps, a deep window, and so on that were to be used for shelter if shots had to be traded with those windows and roofs. Clark was to pay no attention to the Bush Street end of the block, but if the police charged the Pine Street end, he was to move his men up there, distributing them among points marked A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and H. His body was found on the spot marked A. Every 5 minutes during the looting, he was to send a man to an automobile standing in the street at the point marked on the map with a star, see if there were any new instructions. He was to tell his men that if he were shot down, one of them must report to the car, and a new leader would be given to them. When the signal for the getaway was given, he was to send one of his men to the car in which he had come. If it was still in commission, this man was to drive it, not pass in the car ahead of him. If it was out of whack, the man was to report to the star-marked car for instructions on how to get a new one. I suppose they counted on finding enough parked cars to take care of this end. While Clark waited for his car, he and his men were to throw as much lead as possible at every target in their district, and none of them was to board the car until it came abreast of them. Then they were to drive out Montgomery to Columbus to blank. Get that, I asked? There are 150 gunmen split into groups under group leaders with maps and schedules showing what each man is to do, showing the fire plug he's to kneel behind, the brick he's to stand on, where he's to spit, everything but the name and address of the policeman he's to shoot at. It's just as well if Bino couldn't give me the details. I'd have written it off as a hophead's dream. Very interesting, the old man said, smiling blandly. The Fat Boys was the only timetable we found. I went on with my history. I saw a few friends among the killed and caught. The police are still identifying others. Some are local talent, but most of them seem to be imported stock. Detroit, Chicago, New York, St. Louis, Denver, Portland, LA, Philly, Baltimore, all seems to have sent delegates. As soon as the police get through identifying them, I'll make out a list. Those who weren't caught, Blue Point Vance seems to be the main squeeze. He was in the car that directed operations. I don't know who else was in there with him. Shivering Kid was in on the festivities, and I think Alphabet Shorty McCoy, though I didn't get a good look at him. Sergeant Bender told me he spotted Toots Salda and Darby McLaughlin in the push, and Morgan saw the Dis and Dat Kid. It's a good cross-section of the layout. Gunmen, swindlers, hijackers from all over ran McNally. The Hall of Justice has been a slaughterhouse all afternoon. Police haven't killed any of their guests, none that I know of, but they're sure to God making believers out of them. Newspaper writers like to sob over what they call the 3rd degree should be down there now. After being knocked around a bit, some of the guests have talked. But the hell of it is, they don't know a whole lot. They know some names: Denny Burke, Toby the Lugs, old Pete Best, Fat Boy Clark, and Patty the Mex were named. And that helps some, but all the smack and power in the police force arm can't bring out anything else. The racket seems to have been organized like this. Denny Burke, for instance, is known as a shifty worker in Baltimore. Well, Denny talks to 8 or 10 likely boys one at a time. How'd you like to pick up a piece of change out on the coast, he asks them. Doing what, the candidate wants to know. Doing what you're told, the King of Frog Island says. You know me, I'm telling you, this is the fastest pickin' ever rigged. Kicking the pants to go through, airtight. Everybody on it will come home lousy with cash, and they'll all come home if they don't dog it. That's all I'm spilling. If you don't like it, forget it. These birds did know Denny, and if he said the job was good, that was enough for them. So they put in with him. He told them nothing. He saw that they had guns, gave them each a ticket to San Francisco and $20 and told them where to meet him here. Last night he collected them and told them they went to work this morning. By that time they'd moved around town enough to see that it was bubbling over with visiting talent, including such moguls as Toots Salda, Blue Point Vance, and the Shivering Kid. So this morning they went forth eagerly with the King of Frog Island at their head to do their stuff. The other talkers sell varieties of the same tale. Police found a room in their crowded jail to stick in a few stool pigeons. Since few of the bandits knew very many of the others, the stools had an easy time of it. The only thing they could add to it was what we've got from the prisoners that are looking for a wholesale delivery tonight. They seem to think the mob will crash the prison and turn them loose. It's probably a lot of chewing gum, but anyway, this time the police will be ready. Well, that's the situation as it stands now. Police are sweeping the streets, picking up everybody who needs a shave or can't show a certificate of attendance signed by his parson. Special attention to outward bound trains, boats, and automobiles. Sec Jack Cunningham and Dick Foley down in North Beach Way to play the joints and see if they can pick up anything. Do you think Blue Point Vance was the actual directing intelligence of this robbery? The old man asked. I hope so. We know him. The old man turned his chair so his mild eyes could stare out the window again. He tapped his desk reflectively with a pencil. I'm afraid not, he said in a gently apologetic tone. Vance is a shrewd, resourceful, and determined criminal, but his weakness is one of common to his type. His abilities are all for present action and not for planning ahead. He has executed some large operations, but I've always thought I saw in them some other mind at work behind him. I couldn't quarrel with that. The old man said something was so, then it probably was. But he was one of those cautious babies who'll look out of the window at a cloudburst and say, seems to be raining, on the off chance that somebody's pouring water off the roof. And who is this arch gunniff, I asked. You'll probably know that before I do, he said, smiling benignly. I went back to the hall and helped boil more prisoners in oil until around 8 o'clock when my appetite reminded me I hadn't eaten since breakfast. I attended to that and then I turned down towards Leroy's, ambling along leisurely so the exercise wouldn't interfere with my digestion. I spent 3/4 of an hour in Leroy's and didn't see anybody who interested me especially. A few gents I know were present, but they weren't anxious to associate with me. It's not always healthy in criminal circles to be seen wagging your chin with a sleuth right after a job's been turned. Not getting anything there, I moved up the street to Wap Healy's, another hole. My reception was the same here. I was given a table and let alone. Healy's orchestra was given Don't You Cheat all they had, while those customers who felt athletic were roughing it out on the dance floor. One of the dancers was Jack Cunningham, his arms full of a big olive-skinned girl with a pleasant, thick-featured, stupid face. Jack was a tall, slender lad of 23 or 4 who had drifted into the Continental's employ a few months before. It was the first job he'd ever had, and he wouldn't have had it if his father hadn't insisted that if Sonny wanted to keep his fingers in the family till, he'd have to get over the notion that squeezing through a college graduation was enough work for one lifetime. So Jack came to the agency. He thought gumshoeing would be fun, in spite of the fact that he'd rather catch a wrong man than wear a wrong necktie. He was a promising young thief-catcher. Likeable youngster, well-muscled for all his slimness, smooth-haired, with a gentleman's face and a gentleman's manner. Nervy, quick, with head and hands, full of the don't-give-a-damn gaiety that belonged to his youthfulness. He was jingle-brained, of course, and needed holding, but I would rather work with him than with a lot of old-timers I knew. Half an hour passed with nothing interested me. Then a boy came into Healy's from the street. Small kid, gaudily dressed, very pressed in pants legs, very shiny in the shoes, with an impudent sallow face of pronounced cast. This was the boy I had seen sauntering down Broadway a moment after Bino had been rubbed out. Leaning back on my chair so that a woman's wide-hatted head was between us, I watched the young Armenian wind between tables to one in a far corner where 3 men sat. He spoke to them offhand, perhaps a dozen words, and moved away to another table where a snub-nosed, black-haired man sat alone. The boy dropped into the chair facing Snub-Nose, spoke a few words, sneered at Snub-Nose's questions and ordered a drink. When his glass was empty, he crossed the room to speak to a lean, buzzard-faced man and then went out of Healy's. I followed him out, passing the table where Jack sat with the girl, catching his eye. Outside, I saw the young Armenian half a block away. Jack Cunningham caught up with me, passed me. With a Fatima in my mouth, I called to him, "Got a match, brother?" While I lighted my cigarette with a match from the box he gave me, I spoke to him behind my hands. "The goose and the glad rags, tail him. I'll string behind you. I don't know him, but if he blipped Ben off for talking to me last night, he knows me. On his heels." Jack pocketed his matches and went after the boy. I gave Jack a lead and then followed him. And then an interesting thing happened. The street was fairly well filled with people, mostly men, some walking, some loafing on corners and in front of soft drink parlors. As the young Armenian reached the corner of the alley where there was a light, 2 men came up and spoke to him, moving a little apart so that he was between them. The boy would have kept walking, apparently paying no attention to them, but one checked him by stretching an arm out in front of him. The other man took his right hand out of his pocket and flourished it in the boy's face so that the nickel-plated knuckles on it twinkled in the light. The boy ducked swiftly under the threatening hand and outstretched arm and went on across the alley, walking and not even looking over his shoulder at the 2 men who were now closing in on his back. Just before they reached him, another reached them, a broad-backed, long-armed, ape-built man I had not seen before. Each arm caught a man. By the nape of their necks, he yanked them away from the boy's back, shook them till their hats fell off, smacked their skulls together with a crack. It was like a broom handle breaking, and dragged their rag-limp bodies out of sight up the alley. While this was happening, the boy walked jauntily down the street without a backward glance. When the skullcracker came out of the alley, I saw his face in the light. Dark-skinned, heavily lined face, broad and flat, with jaw muscles bulging like abscesses under his ears. He spit, hitched his pants, and swaggered down the street after the boy. The boy went into Leroy's. Skullcracker followed him in. The boy came out, and in his rear, perhaps 20 feet behind, the skullcracker rolled. Jack had tailed him into Lowry's while it held up outside. "Still carrying messages?" I asked. "Yeah, he spoke to 5 men in there. He's got plenty of bodyguard, hasn't he?" "Yeah," I agreed. "You'll be damn careful you don't get between them. If they split, I'll shadow the skullcracker. You keep the goose." We separated and moved after our game. They took us all to the hangouts all over San Francisco. Cabarets, grease joints, pool rooms, saloons, flop houses, hock shops, gambling joints, and what have you. Everywhere the kid found men to speak his dozen words to, and between calls he found them on street corners. I'd have liked to get behind some of these birds, but I didn't want to leave Jack alone with the boy and his bodyguard. They seemed to mean too much, and I couldn't stick Jack on one of the others because it wasn't safe for me to hang too close to the Armenian boy. So we played the game as we had started it, shadowing our pair from hole to hole while night got on towards morning. It was a few minutes past midnight when they came out of a small hotel up on Kearney Street, and for the first time since we had seen them, they walked together, side by side, up to Green Street, where they turned east along the side of Telegraph Hill. Half a block of this, and they climbed the front steps of a ramshackle, furnished room house and disappeared inside. I joined Jack Cunningham on the corner where he had stopped. The greetings have all been delivered, I guess, or he wouldn't have called in his bodyguard. If there's nothing stirring within the next half hour, I'm going to beat it. You'll have to take a plant on this joint till morning. 20 minutes later, the skullcracker came out of the house and walked down the street. I'll take him, I said. You stick to the other baby. Skullcracker took 10 or 12 steps from the house and stopped. He looked back at the house, raising his face to look up the upper stories. Then Jack and I could hear what had stopped him. Up in the house, a man was screaming. It wasn't much of a scream in volume. Even now, when it had increased in strength, it barely reached our ears. But in it, in that one wailing voice, everything that fears death seemed to cry out its fear. I heard Jack's teeth click. I've got horny skin all over what's left of my soul, but just the same, my forehead twitched. The scream was so damned weak for what it said. Skullcracker moved. 5 gliding strides carried him back to the house. He didn't touch one of the 6 or 7 front steps. He went from pavement to vestibule in a spring no monkey could have beaten for swiftness, ease, or silence. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and the screaming stopped. 3 more minutes, and the skullcracker was leaving the house again. He paused on the sidewalk to spit and hitch his pants. Then he swaggered off down the street. He's your meat, Jack, I said. I'm going to call on the boy. You won't recognize me now. The street door of the room and house was not only unlocked, but wide open. I went through it into a hallway where a dim light burning upstairs outlined a flight of steps. I climbed them and turned towards the front of the house. A scream had come from the front, either this floor or the third. There was a fair likelihood of the skullcracker having left the room door unlocked, just as he had not paused to close the street door. I had no luck on the second floor, but the third knob I cautiously tried, and the third floor turned in my hand and let its door edge back from the frame. In front of this crack, I waited a moment, listening to nothing but a throbbing snore somewhere far down the hallway. I put a palm against the door and eased it open another foot. No sound. The room was black as an honest politician's prospects. Slid my hand across the frame, across a few inches of wallpaper, and found a light button and pressed it. 2 globes in the center of the room threw their weak yellow light on the shabby room and on the young Armenian who lay dead across the bed. I went into the room. I closed the door and stepped over to the bed. The boy's eyes were wide and bulging. One of his temples was bruised. His throat gaped with a red slit that ran actually from one ear to the other. Around the slit, the few spots not washed red, his thin neck showed dark bruises. Skullcracker dropped the boy with a poke in the temple and choked him until he thought him dead. The kid had revived enough to scream, not enough to keep from screaming. The skullcracker had returned to finish the job with a knife. 3 streaks on the bedclothes showed where the knife had been cleaned. The lining of the boy's pockets stuck out. Skullcracker had turned them out. I went through his clothes, but with no better luck than I expected. Killer had taken everything. Room gave me nothing, a few clothes, but not a thing out of which information could be squeezed. My prying dentist stood in the center of the room, scratching my chin and considering. In the hall, a floorboard creaked. 3 backward steps of my rubber heels put me in the musty closet, dragging the door all but half an inch shut behind me. Knuckles rattled on the room door as I slid my gun off my hip. Knuckles rattled again, and a feminine voice said, "Kid, oh kid." Neither Knuckles nor voice was loud. The lock clicked as the knob turned. The door opened and framed the shifty-eyed girl who had been called Sylvia Young by Angel Grace. Her eyes lost their shiftiness for surprise when they settled on the boy. "Holy hell!" She gasped and was gone. I was half out of the closet when I heard her tiptoeing back. In my hole again, I waited, my eye to the crack. She came in swiftly, closed the door silently, and went to lean on over the dead boy. Her hands moved over him, exploring the pockets whose linings I had put back in place. "Damn such luck," she said aloud when the unprofitable frisking was over and went out of the house. I gave her time to reach the sidewalk. She was headed toward Kearney Street when I left the house. I shouted her down Kearney to Broadway, or Broadway to Leroy's. Leroy's was busy, especially near the door, with customers going and coming. I was within 5 feet of the girl when she stopped a waiter and asked in a whisper that was excited enough to carry, "Is Red here?" Waiter shook his head. "Ain't been in tonight." The girl went out of the dive, hurrying along, clicking heels to a hotel in Stockton Street. While I looked through the glass front, she went to the desk and spoke to the clerk. He shook his head. She spoke again, and he gave her paper and envelope on which she scribbled with the pen beside the register. Before I had to leave for a safer position from which to cover her exit, I saw which pigeonhole the note went into. From the hotel, the girl went by streetcar to Market and Powell Streets and then walked up Powell to O'Farrell, where a fat-faced young man in a gray overcoat and gray hat left the curb to link arms with her and lead her to a taxi stand up O'Farrell Street. I let him go, making note of the taxi number. Fat-faced man looked more like a customer than a pal. It was a little shy of 2 in the morning when I turned back into Market Street and went up to the office. Fisk, who holds down the agency at nights, at Jack Cunningham, not reported. Nothing else had come in. I told him to rouse me an operative, and in 10 or 15 minutes he succeeded in getting Mickey Linehan out of bed and on the wire. "Listen, Mickey," I said, "I got the nicest corner picked out for you to stand on for the rest of the night, so pin on your diapers and toddle down there, will you?" In between his grumbling and cursing, I gave him the name and number of the Stockton Street Hotel, described Red O'Leary, and told him which pigeonhole the note had been put in. It mightn't be Red's home, but the chance is worth covering. I wound up. "If you pick him up, try not to lose him before I can get somebody down there to take him off your hands." I hung up during the outburst of profanity this insult brought. The Hall of Justice was busy when I reached it, though nobody had tried to shake the upstairs prison loose yet. Fresh lots of suspicious characters were being brought in every few minutes. Policemen in and out of uniform were everywhere. The detective bureau was a beehive. Trading information with the police detectives, I told them about the Armenian boy. We were making up a party to visit the remains when the captain's door opened and Lieutenant Duff came into the assembly room. "Alley-oop," he said, pointing a thick finger at O'Gar, Tully, Reacher, Hunt, and me. "There's a thing worth looking at in Fillmore." We followed him out to an automobile. Gray frame house in Fillmore Street was our destination. A lot of people stood in the street looking at the house. Police wagons stood in front of it. Police uniforms were indoor and out. Red mustachioed corporal saluted Duff and led us into the house, explaining as we went. "'Twas the neighbours give us the rumble, complaining of the fighting, and when we got here, faith, there weren't nobody left to have any fight in 'em." All the house held was 14 dead men. 11 of them had been poisoned, overdoses of knockout drops in their booze, the doctor said. The other 3 had been shot at intervals along the hall. From the looks of the remains, they had drunk a toast, a loaded one, and those who hadn't drunk, whether because of temperance or suspicious natures, had been gunned as they tried to get away. The identity of the bodies gave us an idea of what their toast had been. They were all thieves. They'd all drunk their poison to the day's looting. We didn't know all the dead men then, but all of us knew some of them, and the records told us who the others were later. The completed list read like a who's who in crookdom. There was a dissonant kid who had crushed out a Leavenworth only 2 months before. Sheeny Holmes, Snohomish Shitey, supposed to have died a hero in France in 1919. L.A. Slim from Denver, sockless and underwearless as usual, with a $1,000 bill sewed in each shoulder of his coat. Spider Jerussi, wearing a steel mesh vest under his shirt and a scar from crown to chin where his brother had carved him up years ago. Old Pete Best, once a congressman. Blackjack Vogin, who once won $175,000 in the Chicago crap game. Abracadabra tattooed on him in 3 places. Alphabet Shorty McCoy, Tom Brooks, Alphabet Shorty's brother-in-law, who invented the Richmond razzle-dazzle and brought 3 hotels with the profits. Red Childelay, who stuck up the Union Pacific train in 1924. Denny Burke, Bull McConicle, still pale from 15 years in Jolie. Tully the Lugs, Bulls Running May, who used to brag about picking President Wilson's pocket in the Washington Vaudeville Theater, and Patty the Mex. Duck looked them over and whistled. "Whew, a few more tricks like this," he said, "and we'll all be out of jobs. Won't be any grifters left to protect the taxpayers from." "Glad you like it," I told him. "Me, I'd hate like hell to be a San Francisco copper in the next few days." "Why especially?" "Look at this. One grand piece of double crossing. Village of ours is full of mean lads who are waiting right now for these stiffs to bring them their cuts of the stick up. What do you think's going to happen when the word gets out that there's not going to be any gravy for the mob? There are going to be 100 or more stranded thugs busy raising getaway dough. There'll be 3 burglaries to a block and a stick up to every corner until the car fare's raised. God bless you, my son. You're going to sweat for your wages." Duff shrugged his thick shoulders and stepped over bodies to get to the telephone. And when he was through, I called the agency. "Jack Cunningham called a couple of minutes ago," Fisk told me, and gave me an Army Street address. "He says he put his men in there with company." I phoned for a taxi, and then I told Duff, "I'm going to run out for a while. I'll give you a ring if there's anything to the angle, or if there isn't. You'll wait?" "If you're not too long." I got rid of my taxi cab 2 blocks from the address Fisk had given me and walked down Army Street to find Jack Cunningham planted in a dock corner. "I got a bad break," was what he welcomed me with. "While I was out phoning from the lunchroom up the street, some of my people ran out on me." "Yeah, what's the dope?" "Well, after that AP chat left the Green Street house, he trolleyed to a house in Fillmore Street, and..." "What number?" The number Jack gave me was that of the death house I'd just left. "In the next 10 or 15 minutes, just about that many other chaps went into the same house. Most of them came afoot, singly, in pairs, and then 2 cars came up together with 9 men in them. I counted them. They went into the house, leaving their machines in front. Taxi came past a little later, and I stopped in case my chap should motor away. Nothing happened for at least half an hour after the 9 chaps went in. Then everybody in the house seemed to become demonstrative. There was a quantity of yelling and shooting. It lasted enough to waken the whole neighborhood. When it stopped, 10 men, I counted them, ran out of the house and got into the 2 cars and drove away. My man was one of them. My faithful taxi and I cried yoicks after them, and they brought us here, going into that house down the street in front of which one of their motors still stands. In a half an hour or so, I thought I'd better report. So leaving my taxi around the corner where it's still running up expenses, I went up to Fisk, and when I came back, one of the cars was gone. And woe is me, I don't know who went in it. Am I rotten?" "Sure, you should have taken their cars along to the phone with you. Watch the one that's left while I collect a strong-arm squad." I went up to the lunchroom and I phoned Duff, telling him where I was, and said, "If you bring your gang along, maybe there'd be profit in it. A couple of carloads of folks who were in Fillmore Street and didn't stay there came here, and part of them may still be here if you make it sudden." Duff brought his 4 detectives and a dozen uniformed men with him. We hit the house front and back. No time was wasted ringing the bell. We simply tore down the doors and went in. Everything inside was black until flashlights lit it up. There was no resistance. Ordinarily, the 6 men we found in there would have damn near ruined us in spite of our outnumbering them. But they were too dead for that. We looked at one another, sort of open-mouthed. "This is getting monotonous," Duff complained, biting off a hunk of tobacco. "Everybody's work is pretty much the same thing over and over, but I'm tired of walking into rooms full of butchered crooks." The catalog here had a fewer names than the others, but they were bigger names. Shivering Kid was there. Nobody would collect all the reward money piling up on him now. Darby McLaughlin, his horn-rimmed glasses crooked on his nose, $10,000 worth of diamond on his fingers and tie. Happy Jim Hacker, Donkey Mar, the last of the bow-legged Mars, killers all, fathers and 5 sons. Toot Salda, the strongest man in crookdom, who had once picked up and run away with 2 Savannah coppers to whom he was handcuffed. And Rum Dum Smith, who killed Lefty Reed and Chai in 1916, a rosary wrapped around his left wrist. No gentlemanly poisoning here. These boys have been mowed down with a 30-30 rifle fitted with a clumsy but effective homemade silencer. A rifle lay on the kitchen table, door connected to the kitchen with the dining room. Directly opposite that door, double doors wide open into the room in which the dead thieves lay. They were all close to the front wall, lying as if they had been lined up against the wall to be knocked off. The gray-papered wall was splattered with blood, punctured with holes where a couple of bullets had gone all the way through. Jack Cunningham's young eyes picked out a stain on the paper that wasn't accidental. It was close to the floor beside the shivering kid, and the kid's right hand was stained with blood. He'd written on the wall before he died, with fingers dipped in his own and toots soiled as blood. The letters and the words showed breaks and gaps where his fingers had run dry, and the letters were crooked and straggly because he must have written them in the dark. By filling in the gaps, allowing for the kinks, and guessing where there weren't any indications to guide us, we got 2 words: Big Flora. It don't mean anything to me, Duff said, but it's a name, and most of the names we have belong to dead men now, so it's time we were adding to our list.
What do you make of it?
Asked bullet-headed guard detective sergeant in the homicide detail, looking at the bodies.
That pal's got the drop on him. Lined him up against the wall, and a sharpshooter in the kitchen shot him down. Bang, 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 bang.
It reads that way, the rest of us agreed. 10 of them came here from Fillmore Street, I said. 6 stayed down here. 4 went to another house where part of them are not cutting down the other part. All that's necessary is to trail the corpses from house to house until there's only one man left, and he's bound to play it through by croaking himself, leaving the loot to be recovered in the original packages. I hope you folks don't have to stay up all night to find the remains of that last thug. Come on, Jack, let's go home for some sleep. It was exactly 5 a.m. when I separated the sheets and crawled into my bed. I was asleep before the last draw of smoke from my goodnight Fatima was out of my lungs. The telephone woke me at 5:15. Fisk was talking.
Mickey Linehan just phoned that your Red O'Leary came home to roost half an hour ago.
I'm booked, I said, and I was asleep again by 5:17. With the help of the alarm clock, I rolled out of bed at 9, breakfasted, and went down to the detective bureau to see how the police had made out with the redhead. Not so good. He's got us stopped, the captain told me. He's got alibis for the time of the looting and for last night's doings, and we can't even vag the son of a gun. He's got means of support. He's a salesman for Humperdinck's Universal Encyclopedic Dictionary of Useful and Valuable Knowledge, or something like it. He started peddling these pamphlets the day before the knockover, and at the time it was happening, he was ringing doorbells and asking folks to buy his darn books. Anyway, he's got 3 witnesses that say so. Last night he was in a hotel from 11 to 4:30 in the morning playing cards, and he's got witnesses. We didn't find a darn thing on him or in his room. I borrowed the captain's phone to call Jack Cunningham's house. Could you identify any of the men you saw in the cars last night? I asked when he had been stirred out of bed.
No, it was dark and they moved too fast. I could barely make sure of my chap.
Can't, huh? Said the captain. Well, I can hold him 24 hours without laying charges, and I'll do that. But I'll have to spring him. Unless you can dig something up. I suppose you can turn him loose now, I suggested after thinking through my cigarette for a few minutes. He's got himself all alibied up, so there's no reason he should hide out on us. We'll let him alone all day, give him time to make sure he isn't being tailed, and then we'll get behind him tonight and stay behind him. Any dope on Big Flora?
Nope.
That kid that was killed in Green Street was Bernie Bernheimer, alias Moss the Kid. I guess he was a dip. He ran with dips, but he wasn't very. The phone buzzed, interrupted him. He said, "Hello? Yeah? Just a minute," into the instrument and slid it across the desk to me. A feminine voice said,
"This is Grace Cardigan. I called your agency and they told me where to get you, and I got to see you. Can you meet me now?" Where are you?
I'm in a telephone station on Powell Street.
I said I'll be there in 15 minutes. All in the agency, I got a hold of Dick Foley and asked him to meet me at Ellison Market right away. Then I gave the captain back his phone, said see you later, and went uptown to keep my dates. Dick Foley was on his corner when I got there. He was a swarthy little Canadian who stood nearly 5 feet in his high-heeled shoes, weighed 100 pounds minus, talked like a Scotchman's telegram, and could have shadowed the drop of a salt water from the Golden Gate to Hong Kong without ever losing sight of it. You know Angel Grace Cardigan? I asked him. He saved a word by shaking his head no. Well, I'm going to meet her in the telephone station. When I'm through, stay behind her. She's smart. She'll be looking for you. So it won't be duck soup, but do what you can. Dick's mouth went down at the corners, and one of his rare, long-winded streaks hit him. Harder they look, the easier they are, he said. He trailed along behind me while I went up into the station, and Angel Grace was standing in the doorway. Her face was more sullen than I had ever seen it, and therefore less beautiful, except those green eyes, which held too much fire for sullenness. Rolled newspaper was in one of her hands, and she neither spoke nor smiled nor nodded. We'll go to Charlie's where we can talk, I said, guiding her down past Dick Foley. Not a murmur did I get out of her until we were seated cross-table in the restaurant booth and the waiter had gone off with our orders. Then she spread the newspaper out on the table with shaking hands. Is this on the level? She demanded. I looked at the story her shaking finger tapped. An account of the Fillmore and Army Street findings, but a cagey account. A glance showed that no names had been given, that the police had censored the story quite a bit. While I pretended to read, I wondered whether it would be to my advantage to tell the girl the story was a fake. But I couldn't see any clear profit in that, so I saved my soul to lie. Practically straight, I admitted. You were there? She pushed the paper aside to the floor and was leaning over the table. With the police. Was. Her voice broke huskily. Her white fingers wadded the tablecloth in 2 little bunches halfway between us. She cleared her throat. Who was as far as she got this time. Pause. I waited. Her eyes went down, but not before I had seen water dullen the fire in them. During the pause, the waiter came in, put our food down, and went away. You know what I want to ask, she said presently, her voice low, choked. Was he? What? Was he? For God's sakes, tell me. I weighed them. The truth against the lie, lie against the truth. Once more, truth triumphed. Patty the Mex was shot and killed in the Fillmore Street house, I said. Pupils of her eyes shrank to pinpoints, spread again until they almost covered the green irises. She made no sound. Her face was empty. She picked up a fork and lifted a forkful of salad to her mouth, and then another. Reaching across the table, I took the fork out of her hand. You're only spilling it on your clothes, I growled. You can't eat without opening your mouth to put food in. She put her hands across the table, reaching for mine, trembling, holding my hand with fingers that twitched so that the nails scratched me. You're not lying to me, she half sobbed, half chattered. You're on the square. You were white with me that time in Philly. Patty always said that you were one white dick, that you're not tricking me. Straight up, I assured her. Patty meant a lot to you? She nodded dully, pulling herself together, sinking back into a sort of stupor. The way's open to even up for him, I suggested. You mean? Talk. She stared at me blankly for a long while, as if she was trying to get some meaning out of what I said. I read the answer in her eyes before she put it into words. I wish to God I could, but I'm Paperbox John Cardigan's daughter. It isn't in me to turn anybody up. You're on the wrong side. I can't go over. I wish I could. There's just too much Cardigan in me. I'll be hoping every minute that you'll nail them and nail them dead right, but... Your sentiments are noble, or words to that effect, I sneered at her. Who do you think you are, Joan of Arc? Would your brother Frank be in stir now if his partner Johnny the plumber hadn't put the finger on him for the Great Falls Bulls? Come to life, dearie. You're a thief among thieves, and those who don't get double-crossed get crossed. Who rubbed your Patty the Mex out? Pals. You mustn't slap him back because it wouldn't be clubby. Oh, my God. My speech only thickened the sullenness in her face. I'm going to slap back, she said. But I can't. I can't split. I can't tell you. If I were a gun, I'd... Anyway, what help will I be on my side of the game? You let go at that, won't you? I know how... I know how you feel about it, but... Will you tell me who else was found in the house? Oh, sure, I snarled. I'll tell you everything. I'll let you pump me dry. But you mustn't give me any hints, because it might not be in keeping with the ethics of your highly honorable profession. Being a woman, she ignored all this, repeating, Who else? Nothing stirring, but I will do this. I'll tell you a couple who weren't there. Big Flora and Red O'Leary. Her dopiness was gone. She studied my face with green eyes that were dark and savage. Was Blue Point Vance? She demanded. What do you guess? I replied. She studied my face for a moment longer, and then she stood up. Thanks for what you've told me, she said, and for meeting me like this. I do hope you win. She went out to be shouted by Dick Foley. I ate my lunch. At 4 o'clock that afternoon, Jack Cunningham and I bought our hired automobile to rest within sight of the front door of the Stockton Hotel. He cleared himself with the police, so there's no reason why he should have moved, maybe, I told Jack, and I'd rather not monkey with the hotel people, not knowing them. If he doesn't show by late, we'll have to go up against them then. We settled down to cigarettes, guesses on who'd be the next heavyweight champion and where to get a good gin and what to do with it. The injustice of the new agency ruling that for the purpose of expense accounts, Oakland was not to be considered out of town, and similar exciting topics, which carried us from 4 o'clock to 10 minutes past 9. At 9:10, Red O'Leary came out of the hotel. God is good, as said Jack as he jumped out of the machine to do the footwork while I stirred the motor. Firetop Giant didn't take us far. Leroy's front door gobbled him. By the time I parked the car and gone into the dive, both O'Leary and Jack had found seats. Jack's table was on the edge of the dance floor. O'Leary's was on the other side of the establishment against the wall near a corner. A fat blonde couple were leaving the table in that corner when I came in, so I persuaded the waiter who was guiding me to the table to make it that one. O'Leary's face was 3/4 turned away from me. He was watching the front door, watching it with an earnestness that turned suddenly to happiness when a girl appeared there. She was the girl Angel Grace had called Nancy Reagan. I have already said that she was nice. Well, she was. And the cocky little blue hat that hid all her hair didn't handicap her niceness any tonight. The redhead scrambled to his feet and pushed a waiter and a couple of customers out of his way as he went to meet her. As reward for his eagerness, he got some profanity that he didn't seem to hear and a blue-eyed, white-toothed smile that was, well, nice. He brought her back to his table and he put her in a chair facing me while he sat very much facing her. His voice was a baritone rumble out of which my snooping ears could pick out no words. He seemed to be telling her a lot, and she listened as if she really liked it. But, Reddy, dear, you shouldn't, she said once. Her voice, I know other words, but we'll stick to this one, was nice. Outside the musk in it had quality. Whoever this gunman's mole was, she was either had a good start in life or had learned the stuff well. Now and then, when the orchestra came up for air, I'd catch a few words, but they didn't tell me anything except that neither she nor her rowdy playmate had anything against the other. The joint had been nearly empty when she came in. By 10 o'clock it was fairly crowded, and by 10 o'clock it's early for Leroy's customers. I began to pay less attention to Red's girl, even if she was nice, and more to my other neighbors. It struck me that there weren't many women in sight. Checking up on that, I found damn few women in proportion to the men. Men, rat-faced men, hatchet-faced men, square-jawed men, slack-chinned men, pale men, scrawny men, funny-looking men, tough-looking men, ordinary men, sitting 2 at a table, 4 at a table, more coming in, and damn few women. These men talked to one another as if they weren't much interested in what they were saying. They looked casually around the joint with eyes that were blankest when they came to O'Leary, and always those casual, bored glances did rest on O'Leary for a second or two. I returned my attention to O'Leary and Nancy Reagan. He was sitting a little more erect in his chair than he had been, but it was an easy, supple erectness, as though his shoulders had hunched a bit. There was no stiffness in them. She said something to him, and he laughed, turning his face towards the center of the room, so that he seemed to be laughing not only at what she said, but also at these men who sat around him, waiting. It was a hearty laugh, young and careless. The girl looked surprised for a moment, as if something in the laugh puzzled her, and she went on with whatever she was telling him. She didn't know she was sitting on dynamite, I decided. O'Leary knew. Every inch of him, every gesture said, "I'm big, strong, young, tough, and red-headed. When you boys want to do your stuff, I'll be here." Time slid by. A few couples danced. Gene Leroy went around with dark worry around his face. His joint was full of customers, but he would rather have had it empty. By 11 o'clock, I stood up and beckoned Jack Cunningham. He came over, we shook hands, exchanged how's everything and getting munches and all of that, and then we sat down at my table. "What is happening?" he asked under the cover of the orchestra's din. "I can't see anything, but there's something in the air, or am I being hysterical?" "You will be presently. The wolves are gathering, and Red O'Leary's the lamb. You could pick a tenderer one if you had a free hand, maybe. But these bimbos once helped pluck a bank, and when payday came, there wasn't anything in their envelopes, not even any envelopes. The word got out that maybe Red knew how come, hence this. They're waiting now, maybe for somebody, maybe till they get enough hooch in them. And we'll sit here beside its nearest table to target for all those fellows' bullets when the bloomin' lid blows off?" Jack inquired. "Let's move over to the Red's table. It's still nearer, and I rather like the appearance of the girl with him." "Don't be impatient. You'll have your fun," I promised him. "There's no sense in having this O'Leary killed. If they bargain with him in a gentlemanly way, we'll lay off. If they start heaving things at him, you and I are going to pry him and his girlfriend loose." "Well spoken, my hearty," he grinned, whitening around the mouth. "Are there any details, or do we just simply and unostentatiously pry him loose?" "See that door behind me to the right? When the pop-off comes, I'm going back there and opening it up. You hold the line midway between. When I yelp, you give Red whatever help he needs to get back there." "Aye, aye." He looked around the room at the assembled pug-uglies, moistened his lips, and looked at the hand holding his cigarette, quivering hand. "I hope you won't think I'm in a funk," he said, "but I'm not an antique murderer like you. I get a reaction out of this prospective slaughtering." "Reaction, my eye, you're scared stiff. No nonsense, mind. If you try to make a vaudeville act out of it, I'll ruin whatever those gorillas leave of you. You do what you're told and nothing else. If you get any bright ideas, save them and tell me about them afterwards." Oh, my conduct will be most exemplary," he assured me. It was nearly midnight when what the wolves waited for came. The last pretense of indifference went out of faces that had been gradually taken on tenseness. Chairs and feet scraped as men pushed themselves back a little from their tables. Muscles flexed, bodies into readiness for action. Tongues licked lips and eyes looked eagerly at the front door. Blue Point Vance was coming into the room. He came alone and nodding to acquaintances on this side and that, carrying his tall body gracefully, easily in its well-cut clothing. His sharp-featured face was smiling, self-confident. He came without haste and without delay to Red O'Leary's table. I couldn't see Red's face, but muscles thickened on the back of his neck, and the girl smiled cordially at Vance and gave him her hand. It was naturally done. She didn't know anything. Vance turned his smile from Nancy Reagan to the red-haired giant, a smile that was a trifle cat-to-mousy. "How's everything, Red?" he said bluntly. "Everything suits me," bluntly. The orchestra had stopped playing. LaRue was standing by the street door and was mopping his forehead with a handkerchief. At the table to my right, a barrel-chested, broken-nosed bruiser in a widely striped suit was breathing heavily between his gold teeth, his watery gray eyes bulging at O'Leary, Vance, and Nancy. He was in no way conspicuous. There were too many others holding the same pose. Blue Point Vance turned his head, called to her waiter, "Bring me a chair." A chair was brought and put at the unoccupied side of the table facing the wall. Vance sat down, slumping back in the chair, leaning indolently towards Red, his left arm hooked over the chair back, his right hand holding a cigarette. "Well, Red," he said when he was thus installed, "you got any news for me?" His voice was suave, but loud enough for those at nearby tables to hear. "Not a word." O'Leary's voice made no pretense of friendliness nor of caution. "What, no spinach?" Vance's thin lipped smile spread, and his dark eyes had mirthful but not pleasant glitter. "Nobody gave you anything to give to me?" "No," said O'Leary emphatically. "My goodness," said Vance, the smile in his eyes and mouth deepening and getting still less pleasant. "That's ingratitude. Will you help me collect, Red?" "No." I was disgusted with this redhead, half-minded to let him go under with him when the storm broke. Why couldn't he have stalled his way out and fixed up Fancy Tail that Blue Point would have had to halfway accept? But no, this O'Leary boy was so damn childishly proud of his toughness, he had to make a show of it when he should have been using his bean. If he had been only his own carcass that was due for a beating, it would have been all right. But it wasn't all right that Jack and I should have to suffer. This big chump was too valuable to lose. We'd have to get ourselves all battered up saving him from the rewards of his own pig-headedness. There was no justice in it. "I've got a lot of money coming to me, Red," Vance spoke lazily, tauntingly, "and I need that money." Drew on his cigarette, casually blew the smoke into the redhead's face and drawled, "Why, do you know the laundry charges 26 cents just for doing a pair of pajamas? I need money." "Sleep in your underclothes," said O'Leary. Vance laughed. Nancy Reagan smiled, but in a bewildered way. She didn't seem to know what it was all about, but she couldn't help knowing that it was about something. O'Leary leaned forward and spoke deliberately, loud enough for any to hear. "Blue Point, I ain't got nothing to give you now or ever. That goes for anybody else that's interested. If you or them think I owe you something, try and get it. The hell with you, Blue Point Vance, and if you don't like it, you've got friends here. Call them on." What a prime young idiot. Nothing would suit him but an ambulance, and I must be dragged along with him. Vance grinned evilly, his eyes glittering into O'Leary's face. "You'd like that, Red?" O'Leary hunched his big shoulders and let him drop. "I don't mind a fight," he said, "but I'd like to get Nancy out of it." He turned to her. "Better run along, honey. I'm going to be busy." She started to say something, but Vance was talking to her. His words were lightly spoken. He made no objection to her going. The substance of what he told her was that she was going to be lonely without Red, but he went intimately into details of that loneliness. Red O'Leary's right hand rested on the table. It went up to Vance's mouth. The hand was a fist when it got there. A wallop of that sort is awkward to deliver. The body can't give it much. It has to depend on the arm muscles, and not on the best of those. Yet Blue Point Vance was driven out of his chair and across to the next table. Leroy's chairs went empty. The shindig was on. "On your toes," I growled to Jack Cunningham, and doing my best to look like the nervous little fat man I was, I ran towards the back door, passing men who were moving not yet swiftly towards O'Leary. I must have looked the part of a scared trouble dodger because nobody stopped me. I reached the door before the pack had closed on Red. The door was closed, but not locked. I wheeled it with my back to it, blackjack in my right hand, gun in my left. Men were in front of me, but their backs were to me. O'Leary was towering in front of his table, his tough red face full of "bring on your hell," his big body balanced on the balls of his feet. Between us, Jack Cunningham stood, his face turned to me, his mouth twitching in a nervous grin, his eyes dancing with delight. Blue Point Vance was on his feet again. Blood trickled from his thin lips down his chin. His eyes were cool. He looked at Red O'Leary with the businesslike look of a logger sizing up the tree he was going to bring down. Vance's mob watched Vance. "Red!" I bawled into the silence. "This way, Red!" Faces spun to me, every face in the joint, millions of them. "Come on, Red!" Jack Cunningham yelled, taking a step forward, his gun out. Blue Point Vance's hand flashed to the V on his coat, and Jack's gun snapped at him.
Blue Point had thrown himself down before the boy's trigger was yanked. The booglet went wide, but Vance's jaw was gummed. Red scooped the girl up with him in his left arm. A big automatic blossomed in his right fist. I didn't pay much attention to him after that. I was busy. Leroy's home was pregnant with weapons, guns, knives, saps and knuckles, club-swung chairs and bottles, miscellaneous implements of destruction. Men brought their weapons over to mingle with me. The game was to nudge me away from the door. O'Leary would have liked it, but I was no fire-haired young rowdy. I was pushing 40 and I was 20 pounds overweight. I had the liking for ease that goes with age and weight. Little ease I got. A squint-eyed Portuguese slashed at my neck with a knife that spoiled my necktie. I caught him over the ear with the side of my gun before he could get away and saw the ear tear loose. A grinning kid at 20 went down for my legs, football stuff. Felt his teeth in my knee. I pumped up, and I felt him break. Pockmarked mulatto pushed a gun barrel over the shoulder of the man in front of him. My blackjack crunched the arm of the man in front. He went sideways as the mulatto pulled the trigger and had the side of his face blown away. I fired twice, once when a gun was level within a foot of my middle, once when I discovered a man standing on a table not far off taking careful aim at my head. For the rest, I trusted my arms and legs and saved bullets. Night was young and I had only a dozen pills, 6 in the gun, 6 in my pocket. It was a swell bag of nails. Swing right, swing left, kick, swing right, swing left, kick. Don't hesitate, don't look for targets. God will see that there's always a mug there for your gun or blackjack to sock, a belly for your foot. Bottle came through and found my forehead. My hat saved me some, but the crack didn't do me any good. I swayed and broke a nose where I should have smashed a skull. The room seemed stuffy, poorly ventilated. Somebody ought to tell Leroy about it. How do you like the lead and leather pat on the temple, Blondie? This rat on my left was getting too close. I'll draw him in by bending to the right to poke the mulatto, and then I'll lean back into him and let him have it. Not bad, but I can't keep this up all night. Where are Red and Jack? Standing off watching me? Somebody socked me in the shoulder with something, a piano, from the feel of it. I couldn't miss it. Another thrown bottle took my hat and part of my scalp. Red O'Leary and Jack Cunningham smashed through, dragging the girl between them. While Jack put the girl through the door, Red and I cleared a little space in front of us. He was good at that, and I didn't dog him on it, but I did let him get all the exercise he wanted. "All right," Jack called. Red and I went through the door, slammed it shut. It wouldn't hold even if locked. O'Leary sent 3 slugs to it to give the boys something to think about, and our retreat got underway. We were in a narrow passageway lighted by a fairly bright light. The other end was a closed door. Halfway down to the right, steps led up. "Straight ahead?" asked Jack, who was in front. O'Leary said, "Yes." And I said, "No, Vance will have that blocked by now if the bulls hadn't. Upstairs to the roof." We reached the stairs. The door behind us burst open. The light went out. The door at the other end of the passage slammed open. No light came through either door. Vance would want light. Leroy must have pulled a switch, trying to keep his dump from being torn to toothpicks. Tumult boiled in the dark passage as we climbed the stairs by the touch system. Whoever had come through the back door was mixing it with those who had followed us, mixing it with blows, curses, and an occasional shot. More power to them. We climbed, Jack leading the girl next, and me, the last of all, O'Leary. Jack was gallantly reading road signs to the girl. "Careful of the landing. Half a turn to the left now. Put your hand on the wall and—" "Shut up," I growled at him. "It's better to have her falling down than to have everybody in the drum fall on us." We reached the 2nd floor. It was black as black. There were 3 stories to the building. "I've mislaid the bloomin' stairs," Jack complained. We poked around in the dark, hunting for the flight that should lead up towards the roof. We didn't find it. Riot downstairs was quiet, and Vance's voice was telling his push that they were mixing it with each other, asking where we had gone. Nobody seemed to know. We didn't know either. "Come on," I grumbled, leading the way down a dark hall towards the back of the building. "We've got to go somewhere." There was still noise downstairs, but no more fighting. Men were talking about getting lights. I stumbled into the door at the end of the hall, pushed it open. A room with 2 windows through which came a pale glow from street lights. It
It seemed brilliant after the haul. My little flock followed me and we closed the door. Red O'Leary was across the room as noodled to an open window. "Back street," he whispered. "No way down unless we drop." "Anybody in sight?" I asked. "I don't see any." I looked around the room. Bed, couple of chairs, chest of drawers, and a table. "The table will go through the window," I said. "We'll chuck it as far as we can. Hope the racket will lead them out there before they decide to look up here." Red and the girl were assuring each other that each was still all in one piece. He broke away from her to help me with the table. We balanced it, swung it, let it go. It did nicely, crashing into the wall of the building opposite, dropping down into a backyard to clang and clatter on a pile of tin or a collection of garbage cans or something beautifully noisy. You couldn't have heard it more than a block and a half away. We got away from the window as men bowled out of Leroy's back door. The girl, unable to find any wounds on O'Leary, had turned to Jack Cunningham. He had a cut cheek, and she was monkeying with it in her handkerchief. "When you finish that," Jack was telling her, "I'm going out and get one up on the other side." "I'll never finish if you keep talking," you jiggle your cheek. "That's a swell idea," he exclaimed. "San Francisco is the second largest city in California. Sacramento is the state capital. You like geography? Shall I tell you about Java? I've never been there, but I drink their coffee if—" "Oh, silly," she said, laughing. "If you don't hold still, I'll stop now." "Not so good," he said. "I'll be still." She wasn't doing anything except wiping blood off his cheek, blood that had better been let dry there. When she finished this perfectly useless surgery, she took her hand away, slowly surveying the hardly noticeable results with pride. As her hand came on the level with his mouth, Jack jerked his head forward to kiss the tip of one passing finger. "Oh, silly," she said again, snatching her hand away. "Lay off of that," said Red O'Leary. "I'll knock you off." "Pull you in your neck," said Jack Cunningham. "Ready?" the girl cried too late. O'Leary's right looped out, and Jack took the punch on the button and went to sleep on the floor. Big Redhead spun on the balls of his feet to loom over me. "You got anything to say?" he asked. I grinned down at Jack, up at Red. "I'm ashamed of him," I said, letting himself be stopped by a palooka who leads with his right. "You want to try it?" Ready, the girl pleaded, but nobody was listening to her. "If you lead with your right," I said. "I will," he promised and did. I grandstanded, slipping my head out of the way, laying a forefinger on his chin. That could have been a knuckle. "Yes, this is one." I managed to get under his left, taking the forearm across the back of my neck, but that about played out the acrobatics. It looked as if I would have to see what I could do to him, if any. The girl grabbed his arm and hung on. "Ready, darling, haven't you had enough of fighting for one night? Can't you be sensible, even if you're Irish?" I was tempted to pace the big chew while his playmate had him tied up. He laughed down at her, ducked his head to kiss her mouth, and grinned at me. "There's always some other time," he said good-naturedly. "We'd better get out of here if we can," I said. "You've made too much rumpus for it to be safe." "Don't get it up in your neck, little man," he told me. "Hold on to my coattails and I'll pull you out." The big tramp. If it hadn't been for Jack and me, he wouldn't have had any coattail by now. We moved to the door, listening there, heard nothing. "The stairs to the third floor must be up front," I whispered. "We'll try them for now." We opened the door carefully. Enough light went past us into the hall to show a promise of emptiness. We crept down the hall, Red and I each holding one of the girl's hands. Hoped Jack would come out all right, but he had put himself to sleep and I had troubles of my own. I hadn't known that Leroy's was large enough to have 2 miles of hallway. It did. It was even a mile in the darkness to the head of the stairs we had come up. We didn't pause there to listen to the voices below. At the end of the next mile, O'Leary's foot found the bottom step of the flight leading up. Just then a yell broke out at the head of this other flight. "All up! They're up here!" A white light beamed up on the yeller, and a brogue addressed him from below. "Come on down, you windbag." "It's the police," Nancy Reagan whispered, and we hustled our newfound steps up to the 3rd floor. More darkness, just like that we'd left. We stood still at the top of the stairs. We didn't seem to have any company. "The roof," I said, "will risk matches." Back in a corner, our feeble matchlight found us a ladder nailed to the wall, leading to a trap in the ceiling. As little later as possible, we were on Leroy's roof, and the trap closed behind us. All silk so far, said O'Leary, and if Vance's rats and the bulls will play a couple of seconds longer, bing avast. A little way across the roof, we dropped 10 feet to the next building, climbed a bit to the next, and found on the other side of it a fire escape, ran down to a narrow court with an opening in a back street. This ought to do it, I said, and went down. The girl came behind me and then read. The court into which we dropped was empty, a narrow cement passage between buildings. The bottom of the fire escape creaked as it hinged down under my weight, but the noise didn't stir anything. It was dark in the court, but not black. When we hit the street, we'll split, O'Leary told me without a word of gratitude for my help, the help he didn't seem to know he had needed. You roll your hoop, we'll roll ours. I agreed, chasing my brains around my skull. I'll scout the alley first. Carefully, I picked my way down to the end of the court and risked the top of my hatless head to peep around into the back street. It was quiet, but at the corner, a quarter of a block above, two loafers seemed to be loafing attentively. They weren't coppers. I stepped out into the back street and beckoned them. They couldn't recognize me at a distance in that light, and there was no reason why they shouldn't think me one of Vance's crew if they belonged to him. As they came towards me, I stepped back into the court and hissed for Red. He wasn't a boy you had to call twice to a row. He got to me just as they arrived. I took one, he took the other. Because I wanted a disturbance, I had to work like a mule to get it. These bimbos were a couple of lollipops for fare. There wouldn't have been an ounce of fight in a ton of them. The one I had didn't know what to make of my roughing him around. He had a gun, but he managed to drop it first thing, and in the wrestling it got kicked out of reach. He hung on while I sweated and jockeying around him to the position. The darkness helped, but even at that, it was no cinch to pretend he was putting up a battle while I worked him around behind O'Leary, who wasn't having any trouble at all with his man. Finally, I made it. I was behind O'Leary, who had his man pinned against the wall with one hand, preparing to sock him again with the other. Clamped my left hand on my playmate's wrist, twisted him to his knees, got my gun out, and shot O'Leary in the back, just below the right shoulder. Red swayed, jamming his man into the wall. I beamed mine with the gun butt. "Did he get you, Red?" I asked, steadying him in the arm, knocking his prisoner across the noodle. "Yeah." "Nancy," I called. She ran to us. "Take his other side," I told her. "Keep on your feet, Red, and we'll make the sneak, okay?" The bullet was too freshly in him to slow him up yet, though his right arm was out of commission. We ran down the back street to the corner. We had pursuers before we made it. Curious faces looked at us in the street. Policemen a block away began to move our way. The girl helping O'Leary on one side, me on the other. We ran half a block away from the copper to where I had left the automobile jacket I had used. The street was active by the time I got the machinery grinding and the girl had Red stowed safely in the back seat. The copper sent a yell and a high bullet after us, so we left the neighborhood. I didn't have any special destination left, so after the necessary first burst of speed, I slowed up a little, went down lots and lots of corners, and brought the bus to rest in a dark street beyond Van Ness Avenue. Red was drooping in one corner of the back, the girl holding him up, when I screwed around in my seat to look at them. "Where to?" I asked. "A hospital, a doctor, something," the girl cried. "He's dying." I didn't believe that. If he was, it was his own fault. If he had enough gratitude to take me along with him as a friend, I wouldn't have had to shoot him so I could go along as a nurse. "Where to, Red?" I asked him, prodding his knee with a finger. He spoke thickly, giving me the address of the Stockton Street Hotel. "That's no good," I objected. "Everybody in town knows you bunk there, and if you go back, it's lights out for you. Where to?" "Hotel," he repeated. I got up, knelt on the seat, leaned back to work on him. He was weak. He couldn't have much resistance left. Bulldozing a man who might after all be dying wasn't gentlemanly, but I had invested a lot of trouble in this egg, trying to get him to lead me to his friends, and I wasn't going to quit in the stretch. For a while it looked as if he wasn't weak enough yet, and I'd have to shoot him again. But the girl sided with me, and between us we finally convinced him that his only safe bet was to go somewhere where he could hide while he got his right kind of care. We didn't actually convince him, we wore him out. He gave us an address because he was too weak to argue longer. He gave me an address out by Holly Park. Hoping for the best, I pointed the machine thither. The house was a small one in a row of small houses. We took the big boy out of the car and between us to the door. He could just about make it with our help. The street was dark. No light showed from the house. I rang the bell. Nothing happened. I rang again and then once more. "Who is it?" a harsh voice demanded from the inside. "Red's been hurt," I said. Silence for a while, then the door opened half a foot. Through the opening, a light came from the interior, enough light to show the flat face and bulging jaw muscles of the skull-cracker who had been Mamasta Kid's guardian in execution. "What the hell?" he asked. "Red was jumped. They got him," I explained, pushing the limp giant forward. We didn't crash the gate that way. The skull-cracker held the door as it was. "You'll wait," he said, and shut the door in our faces. His voice sounded from within. "Flora!" It was all right. Red had brought us to the right place. When he opened the door again, he opened it all the way, and Nancy Regan and I took our burden into the hall. Besides the skull-cracker stood a woman in a low-cut black silk gown. Big Flora, I supposed. She stood at least 5'10" in her high-heeled slippers. They were small slippers, and I noticed her ringless hands were small. The rest of her wasn't. She was broad-shouldered, deep-bosomed, thick-armed, with a pink throat, which had all its smoothness, was muscled like a wrestler's. She was about my age, close to 40, very curly and very yellow-bobbed hair, very pink skin, and a handsome, brutal face. Her deep-set eyes were gray, her thick lips were well-shaped, and her nose was just broad enough and curved enough to give her a look of strength, and she had chin enough to support it. From forehead to throat, her pink skin was underlaid with smooth, thick, strong muscles. This Big Flora was no toy. She had the look and the poise of a woman who could have managed the looting and the double-crossing afterwards. Unless her face and body lied, she had all the strength of physique, mind, and will that would be needed, and some to spare. She was made of stronger stuff than either the 8-built bruiser at her side or the red-haired giant I was holding. "Well?" she asked when the door had closed behind her. Her voice was deep but not masculine, a voice that went well with her looks. "Vance ganged him in Leroy's. He took one in the back," I said. "Who are you?" "Get him to bed," I stalled. "We got all night to talk." She turned, snapping her fingers. A shabby little old man darted out of a door near the rear. His brown eyes were very scary. "Get the hell upstairs," she ordered. "Fix the bed, get hot water and towels." The little old man scrambled up the stairs like a rheumatic rabbit. Skullcracker took the girl's side of Red, and he and I carried the giant up to a room where the little man was scurrying around with basins and cloth. Flora and Nancy Regan followed us. We spread the wounded man's face down on the bed and stripped him. Blood still ran from the bullet hole. He was unconscious. Nancy Regan went to pieces. "He's dying. Get a doctor." "Already, dearest." "Shut up," said Big Flora. "The damn fool ought to croak going to Leroy's tonight." She caught the little man by the shoulder and threw him at the door. "Zonite, more water," she called after him. "Give me your knife, Pogie." The 8-built man took from his pocket a spring knife with a long blade that had been sharpened until it was narrow and thin. This was the knife, I thought, that cut the Mamasta Kid's throat. With it, Big Flora cut the bullet out of Red O'Leary's back. The 8-built Pogie kept Nancy Regan over in a corner of the room while the operating was done. The little scared man knelt beside the bed, handing the woman what she asked for, mopping up Red's blood as it ran from the wound. I stood beside Flora, smoking cigarettes from the pack she had given me. When she raised her head, I would transfer the cigarette from my mouth to hers. She'd fill her lungs with a draw that ate half the cigarette and nod. I'd take the cigarette from her mouth. She'd blow out the smoke and bend to her work again. I'd light another cigarette from what was left of that one and be ready for her next smoke. Her bare arms were blood to the elbows. Her face was damp with sweat. It was a gory mess, and it took time. But when she straightened up for the last smoke, the bullet was out of Red, the bleeding had stopped, and he was bandaged. "Thank God that's over," I said, lighting one of my own cigarettes. "Those pills you smoke are terrible." The little scared man was cleaning up. Nancy Regan had fainted in a chair in the corner. Nobody was paying any attention to her. "Keep your eye on this gent, Pogie," Big Flora told the skullcracker, nodding at me, "while I wash up." I went over to the girl, rubbed her hands, put some water on her face, and got her awake. "Bullet's out. Red's sleeping. He'll be picking fights again within a week," I told her. Jumped up and ran over to the bed. Flora came in. She had washed and changed her blood-stained black gown for a green kimono affair, which gaped here and there to show a lot of the orchid-colored underthings. "Talk," she commanded, standing in front of me. "Who, what, and why?" Percy McGuire, I said, as if this name, which I just thought up, explained everything. That's the who, she said, as if my phony alias explained nothing. Now what's the what and the why? The 8-billed Pogie, standing on one side, looked me up and down. I'm short and lumpy. My face doesn't scare children, but it's a more or less truthful witness to life that hasn't been overburdened with refinement and gentility. The evening's entertainment had decorated me with bruises and scratches and had done things to what was left of my clothes. Percy, he echoed, showing wide-spaced yellow teeth and a grin. My God, brother, your folks must have been colorblind. Well, that's the what and the why, I insisted to the woman, paying no attention to the wheeze from the zoo. I'm Percy McGuire, and I want my $150,000. The muscle in her brows came down over her eyes. You got $150,000, have you? I nodded up into her handsome, brutal face. Yeah, I said, that's what I came for. Oh, you haven't got them? You want them? Listen, sister, I want my dough. I had to get tough if this play gets me anything but a thirst. We were in a big knockover, you see. And after that, when we find the payoff's a bust, I said to the kid I was training with, never mind, kid, we'll get our whack. Just follow Percy. And then Blue Point comes to me to throw in with him, and I said, sure, me and the kid throw in with him until we all come across Red in the dump tonight. And then I told the kid, these coffee and donut guns are going to rub Red out. And that won't get us anything. We'll take him away from him, and we'll make him steer us to where Big Flora's sitting on the jack. We ought to be good for $150,000 apiece now that there's damn few in on it. And after we get that, if we want to bump Red off, all right. But business before pleasure, and $150,000 is business. So we did. We opened it out for the big boy, and when he didn't have any. Kid got mushy with the broad along the road and got knocked for a loop. That's all right with me. If she was worth $150,000 to him, fair enough. I came on with Red. I pulled a big tramp out after he stopped the slug. By rights, I ought to collect the kid's dib, too, making $300,000 for me. But give me the $150,000 I started out for, and we'll call it even Steven. I thought this hocus ought to stick. Of course, I wasn't counting on her ever giving me any money, but if the rank and file of the mob hadn't known these people, why should these people know everybody in the mob? Flora spoke to Pogie. Get that damn heap away from the front door. It felt better when he went out. She wouldn't have sent him out to move the car if she hadn't meant to do anything to me right away. Got any food in the joint, I asked, making myself at home. Went to the head of the steps and yelled down, get something for us to eat. Red was still unconscious. Nancy Regan sat beside him, holding one of his hands, her face drained white. Big Flora came into the room, looked at the invalid, put a hand on his forehead, felt the pulse. Come on downstairs, she said. I'd rather stay here if I may, Nancy Regan said, voice and eyes showing utter terror of Flora. Big woman, saying nothing, went downstairs. I followed her to the kitchen where the little man was working on ham and eggs at the range. The window and back door I saw were reinforced with heavy planking and braced with timbers nailed to the floor. Clock over the sink said 2:50 a.m. Flora brought out a quart of liquor and poured drinks for herself and me, and we sat at the table while we waited for our food. She cursed Red O'Leary and Nancy Regan because he'd gotten himself disabled, keeping a date with her at a time when Flora needed his strength most. She cursed them individually as a pair and was making it a racial matter by cursing all the Irish when the little man gave us our ham and eggs. We had finished the solids and were stirring hooch in our second cups of coffee when Pogie came back. He had news. There's a couple of mugs hanging around the corner that I don't like. Bulls or? Flora asked. Or, he said. Flora began to curse Red and Nancy again, but she had pretty well played that line out already. She turned to me. What the hell did you bring him here for? Leaving a mild, wild trail behind you. Why didn't you let the lousy bum die when he got his dose? Brought him here for my $150,000. Slip it to me and I'll be on my way. You don't owe me anything else. I don't owe you anything. Give me my rhino instead of lip and I'll pull my freight. Like hell you will, said Pogie. The woman looked at me under lowered brows and drank her coffee. "15 minutes later, the shabby little old man came running into the kitchen, saying he had heard feet in the roof. His faded brown eyes were dull as an ox's with fright, and his withered lips writhed under his straggly yellow-white mustache. Flora profanely called him a this and a that, of old one thing or another, and chased him upstairs again. She got up from the table and pulled the green kimono tight around her big body. "You're here," she told me. "You'll pull with us? There's no other way. You got a rod?" I admitted I had a gun, but I shook my head at the rest of it. "This isn't my wake yet," I said. "I'll take my 150,000 berries spot cash, paid in the hand, to buy Percy in on it." I wanted to know if there was loot on the premises. Nancy Regan's tearful voice came from the stairs. "No, no, darling, please, please, go back to bed. You'll kill yourself. Ready, dear." Red O'Leary strode into the kitchen. He was naked except for a pair of gray pants and his bandage. His eyes were feverish and happy. His dry lips were stretched in a grin. He had a gun in his left hand. His right arm hung useless. Behind him trotted Nancy. She stopped pleading and shrank behind him when she saw Big Flora. "The gong and let's go," the half-naked redhead laughed. "Vance is in our street." Flora went over to him, put her fingers on her wrist, held him there a couple of seconds, and nodded. "You crazy son of a gun," she said in a tone that was more like maternal pride than anything else. "You're good for a fight now, and a damn good thing, too, 'cause you're going to get it." Red laughed, a triumphant laugh that boasted of his toughness. Then his eyes turned on me. Laughter went out of them, and a puzzled look drew them narrow. "Hello," he said. "I dreamed about you, but I can't remember what it was. It was... Wait, I'll get it in a minute. It was a... by God, I dreamed it was you that plugged me." Flora smiled at me. First time I'd seen her smile, and she spoke quickly. "Take him, Pogie." I twisted obliquely out of my chair. Pogie's fist took me in the temple, staggering across the room, struggling to keep my feet. I thought of the bruise on the dead monster kid's temple. Pogie was on me when the wall bumped me upright. I put a fist, splat, in his flat nose. Blood squirted, but his hairy paws gripped me. I tucked my chin in, ground the top of my head into his face. The scent Big Flora used came strong to me. Her silk clothes brushed against me, and with both hands full of my hair, she pulled my head back, stretching my neck for Pogie. He took hold of it with his paws, and I quit. He didn't throttle me any more than was necessary, but it was bad enough. Flora frisked me for gun and blackjack. "38 Special," she named the caliber of the gun. "I dug a 38 Special out of you, Red." The words came faintly to me through the roaring of my ears. Little old man's voice was chattering in the kitchen. I couldn't make out anything he said. Pogie's hands went away from me. I put my own hands to my throat. It was hell not to have any pressure at all there. Blackness went slowly away from my eyes, leaving a lot of little purple clouds that floated around and around. Presently, I could sit on the floor, and I knew by that I'd been lying down on it. The purple clouds shrank until I could see past them enough to know there were only 3 of us in the room now. Cringing in a chair back in a corner was Nancy Regan. On another chair beside the door, a black pistol in his hand, sat the scared little old man. His eyes were desperately frightened. Gun in hand, shook at me. I tried to ask him to either stop shaking or move his gun away from me, but I couldn't get any words out yet. Upstairs, guns boomed, their reports exaggerated by the smallness of the house. The little man winced. "Let me get out," he whispered with unexpected abruptness, "and I will give you everything. I will, everything, if you let me get out of this house." A feeble ray of light where there hadn't been a dot gave me back my use of my vocal apparatus. "Talk turkey," I managed to say. "I'll give you those upstairs, that she-devil. I will give you money. I will give you all. If you help me to get out. I am old. I am sick. I cannot live in prison. What have I to do with robberies? Nothing. Is it my fault, that she-devil? You have seen it here. I'm a slave. Who am I near the end of my life? Abuse, cursings, beating, and those are not enough. I must go to prison because that she-devil is a she-devil. I'm an old man who cannot live in prison. You let me go out. You do me this kindness, I will give you that she-devil, all the other devils, and the money they stole. That I will do." That's the panic-stricken little old man squirming and fidgeting in his chair. "How can I get you out?" I asked, getting him from the floor, my eye on his gun, if I could get to him while he talked. "How not? You're a friend of the police, that I know. The police are here now, waiting for daylight before they come into this house. I myself, with my old eyes, saw them take Blue Point Vance. You
can take me out past your friends, the police. You do what I ask, I will give those devils in their money to you. That sounds good, I said, taking a careless step towards him. But can I just stroll out of here when I want to? No, he said, paying no attention to the second step I took towards him. But first I would give you those 3 devils. I would give them to you alive, but without power, and their money. And that I will do. And then you will take me out. And this girl here, he nodded suddenly at Nancy, whose white face, still nice in spite of its terror, was mostly wide eyes just now. She has nothing to do with these devils' crimes. She must go with me. I wondered what this old rabbit thought he could do. He frowned exceedingly thoughtfully while I took still another step towards him. Make no mistake, he whispered earnestly. When that she-devil comes back into this room, you will die. She will kill you certainly. 3 more steps and I would be close enough to take hold of him and his gun. Footsteps were in the hall, too late for a jump. Yes, he hissed desperately. Nodded a split second before Big Flora came through the door. She was dressed for action in a pair of blue pants that were probably pogies, beaded moccasins, a silk waist. A ribbon held her curly yellow hair back from her face. She had a gun in one hand, one in each hip pocket. The one in her hand swung up. We're done, she told me quite matter-of-fact. My newly acquired Confederate whine. Wait, Flora. Not here like this, please. Let me take him into the cellar. She scowled at him, shrugging her silken shoulders. Make it quick, she said. It'll be light in another half an hour. I felt too much like crying to laugh at them. Was I supposed to think this woman would let the rabbit change her plans? Suppose I must have put some value on the old gink's help, or I wouldn't have been so disappointed when this little comedy told me it was a frame-up. But any hole they worked me into couldn't be any worse than the one I was in. So I went ahead of the old man into the hall, opened the door he indicated, switched on the basement light, and went down the rough steps. Behind me he was whispering, I'll show you the monies first, and then I will give you those devils, and you will not forget your promise, and I and the girls shall go to the police. Oh, yeah, I assured the old joker. He came up beside me, sticking the gun butt in my hand. Hide it, he hissed. When I had pocketed that one, he gave me another, producing them with his free hand from under his coat. And he actually showed me the loot. It was still in the boxes and bags in which it had been carried out from the banks. He insisted on opening some of them to show me the money, green bundles belted with the bank's yellow wrappers. The boxes and bags were stacked in a small brick cell that was fitted with a padlocked door to which he had the key. He closed the door and we were through looking, but he did not lock it, and he led me back part of the way we had come. That, as you see, is the money, he said. Now for those, you will stand here hiding behind these boxes. Partition divided the cellar in half. It was pierced by a doorway that had no door. The place the old man told me to hide was close beside this doorway between the partition and 4 packing cases. Hiding there, I'd be to the right of and behind a little bit anyone who came down the stairs and walked through the cellar towards the cell that held the money. That is, I'd be in that position when they went to go through the doorway in the partition. The old man was fumbling beneath one of the boxes, brought out an 18-inch length of lead pipe stuffed in a similar length of black garden hose. Gave this to me as he explained everything. They will come down here one at a time. When they are about to go through this door, you will know what to do with this, and then you will have them, and I will have your promise. Is that not so? Oh, yeah, I sat all up in the air, and he went upstairs. I crouched down behind the boxes, examining the guns he'd given me, and I'm damned if I couldn't find anything wrong with them. They were loaded, and they seemed to be in working order. The finishing touch completely balled me up. I didn't know whether I was in a cellar or a balloon. When Red O'Leary, still naked, except for his pants and bandage, came into the cellar, I had to shake my head violently to clear it in time to bat him across the back of the noodle with his first bare footstep through the doorway. He sprawled down on his face. The old man scurried down the steps full of grins. Hurry, he panted, helping me drag the redhead back into the money cell. Then he produced 2 pieces of cord and tied the giant hand and foot. Hurry, he panted again, and he left me to run upstairs while I went back into my hiding place and hefted the lead pipe, wondering if Flora had shot me, and I was now enjoying the rewards of my virtue in a heaven where I could enjoy myself forever and never socking folks who had been rough with me down below.
The 8-built skullcracker came down, reached the door, and I cracked his skull. Little man came scurrying. We dragged Pogie to the cell, tied him up. "Hurry," panted the old gink, dancing up and down in his excitement. "That she-devil's next, and strike hard." He scrambled upstairs, and I could hear his feet pattering overhead. I got rid of some of my bewilderment, making room for the little bit of intelligence still in my skull. This foolishness we were up to wasn't so. It couldn't be happening. Nothing ever worked out just that way. You didn't just stand in corners and knock people down one after the other like a machine, while a scrawny little bozo up at the other end fed 'em to you. It was too damn silly, and I'd had enough. Passed up my hiding place, put down the pipe, and found another spot to crouch in under some shelves near the steps. I hunkered down here with a gun in each fist. This game I was playing in, it had to be gummy around the edges. I wasn't going to stay put any longer. Flora came down the steps. Behind her trotted the little man. Flora had a gun in each hand. Her gray eyes were everywhere. Her head was down like an animal's coming to fight. Her nostrils quivered. Her body, coming down neither slowly nor swiftly, was balanced like a dancer's. If I live to 1,000,000, I'll never forget the picture this handsome, brutal woman made coming down those unplaned cellar stairs. She was a beautiful, fight-bred animal going into a fight. She saw me as I straightened. "Drop him," I said, but I knew she wouldn't. Little man flicked a limp brown blackjack out of his sleeve and knocked her behind the ear just as she swung her left gun towards me. I jumped over and caught her before she hit the cement. "And now you see," the old man said gleefully. "You have the money and you have them, and now you will get me and that girl out." "First we'll stow this with the others," I said. After he'd helped me to do that, I told him to lock the cell door, and he did it. And I took the key with one hand, his neck with the other. He squirmed like a snake while I ran my other hand over his clothes, removing the blackjack and a gun, finding a money belt around his waist. "Take it off," I ordered. "You don't carry anything out with you." His fingers worked the buckle, dragged the belt from under his clothes, let it fall to the floor. It was padded fat. Still holding his neck, I took him upstairs while the girl still sat frozen on a kitchen chair. Took a stiff hooker of whiskey and a lot of words to thaw her into understanding that she was going out with the old man and that she wasn't to say a word to anybody, especially not to the police. "Where's Reddy?" she asked when color had come back into her face, which had even at the worst never lost its niceness, and thoughts to her head. I told her he was all right and promised her he'd be in the hospital before the morning was over. She didn't ask anything else. I shooed her upstairs for her hat and coat, went with the old man while he got his hat, and then put the pair of them in the front ground floor room. "Stay here till I come for you," I said, and I locked the door and pocketed the key when I went out. The front door and the front window on the ground floor had been planked and braced like the rear ones. I didn't like to risk opening them, even though it was fairly light by now. So I went upstairs, fashioned a flag of truce out of a pillow slip and a bed slat, and hung it out the window and waited until a heavy voice said, "All right, speak your piece." And then I showed myself and told the police I'd let him in. Took 5 minutes' work with a hatchet to pry the front door loose. Chief of police, the captain of detectives, and half the force were waiting on the front steps and pavement when I got the door open. I took them to the cellar and turned Big Flora, Pogie, and Red O'Leary over to them with the money. Flora and Pogie were awake but not talking. While the dignitaries were crowded around the spoils, I went upstairs. The house was full of police sleuths. I swapped greetings with them as I went through the room where I'd left Nancy Regan, the old gink. Lieutenant Duff was trying the locked door while O'Gar and Hunt stood behind him. He opened the door, looked at the old man and the girl, mostly at her, then at me. They were standing in the center of the room. The old man's faded eyes were miserably worried, and the girl's blue ones were darkly anxious. Anxiety didn't ruin her looks a bit. "If that's yours, I don't blame you for locking it up," O'Gar muttered in my ear. "You can run along now," I told the two in the room. "Get all the sleep you need before you report for duty again." They nodded and went out of the house. "That's how your agency evens up," Duff said. "The she employees make up in looks for the ugliness of the he's." Dick Foley came into the hall. "How's your end?" I asked. "Fini. The angel led me to Vance. He led here. I led the bulls here. They got him, got her." 2 shots crashed in the street. We went to the door and saw excitement in a police car down the street. We went down there. Blue Point Van's handcuffs on his wrist was writhing, half on the seat, half on the floor. "We were holding him here in the car, Houston and me," a hard-mouthed plainclothes man explained to Duff. "He made a break, grabbed Houston's gat with both hands, had to drill him twice. A cat in a raised hell, he especially wanted him kept here to put against the others. But God knows I wouldn't have shot him if it hadn't been him or Houston." Duff called the plainclothes man a damn clumsy mick as they lifted Vance up on the seat. Blue Point's tortured eyes focused on me. I know ya?" he asked painfully. "Continental New York?" "Yeah," I said. "I couldn't place yet. Leroy's with Red?" "Yeah," I told him. "Got Red, Flora, Pogie, and the Cush." But not Papa Delombo. "Papa does what?" I asked impatiently, a shiver along my spine. Pulled himself up on the seat. "Papadopoulos," he repeated with an agonizing summoning of the little streak he had left. I tried to shoot him. I saw him walk away with the girl. A bowl too damn quick, wish. His words ran out. He shuddered. Death wasn't a 16th of an inch behind his eyes. White-coated intern tried to get past me into the car. I pushed him out of the way and leaned in, taking Vance by the shoulders. Back of my neck was like ice. My stomach was empty. "Listen, Blue Point," I yelled in his face. "Papadopoulos, little old man, brains of the push?" "Yeah," Vance said, and the last live blood in him came out with the word. I let him drop back on the seat and walked away. Of course. How would I missed it? Little old scoundrel, if he hadn't, for all his scaredness, been the works, how could he have been so neatly turned the others over to me one at a time? They'd been absolutely cornered. It was be killed fighting or surrender and be hanged. They had no other way out. Police had Vance who could tell them and would tell them that the little buzzard was the head man. There wasn't even a chance for him beating the courts with his age, his weakness, and his mask of being driven around by others. And there I had been with no choice but to accept his offer. Otherwise, lights out for me. I had been putty in his hands. His accomplices had been putty. He had slipped the cross over on them as they had helped him slip it over on the others. And I had sent him safely away. Now I could turn the city upside down for him. My promise had only been to get him out of the house, but what a life.